Good morning, everybody, and warm welcome to all of you who have already joined in to the webinar today. I see some other people joining in, but we have a fair bit of content to cover, so let's get started. This is the second in the series of what we're calling the Kanban Conversations, and this is a sort of a new format that we are doing in order to firstly get more people who are both consultants, thought leaders, as well as practitioners of Kanban, and are able to participate in these sessions and share their wisdom, their learning, their actual field experience using Kanban. So today's session is with the topic Flow, the secret sauce of business agility, and let's dive right into it. The agenda for us is to go through some introductions. I'll quickly give you a brief introduction to Digita SWIFT Kanban for those of you who may not know us very well. And then we'll get on to the actual discussion, and we'll have hopefully a good Q&A session at the end of it. I also hope that we can possibly do some interactive questions in the middle, but we will see how it goes. In terms of housekeeping, we are recording this session, and we will provide a copy of these slides in the presentation, the recording to you after the webinar. The one thing that I'll try and do is also to, for those of you who have sent in questions, we have actually got a couple of very good, very interesting questions related to the topic. And also for those of you who have questions after the session today, if you're comfortable, I would like to get you on the session. We'll open up the mic for you, and if you can talk, nothing like it. If not, then we can take your question through the Q&A box that's on the GoToWebinar screen. So today's guest is Sudipta Lahiri, Sudi as I call him, or most of the world calls him. He heads our engineering and product at Digita. Sudi is also an AKT, KCP, essentially a Kanban guru for a number of years. Sudi and I probably began a journey with Kanban around the same time in terms of when we started to build the SWIFT Kanban product. And we have both been fortunate enough to be associated with the Kanban community. And Sudi has done some amazing work in the field, both in Kanban and general agility in overall, including, of course, some really large and complex work with some of our customers, helping them implement lean, agile transformation initiatives as part of an overall umbrella of other work that they might be doing, including digital transformation and so forth. My name is Mahesh, and I am a co-founder, and I'm responsible for marketing at Digita, and also, of course, work with a lot of our customers in Europe and the Americas for helping them implement SWIFT Kanban, and of course further their implementation on Kanban as well. So before I start the session, just a quick background on Digita. So we've been around since 2002, so nearly 20 years now, in the space of lean, agile, project management, application lifecycle management, etc., and really provide a very wide set of capabilities for helping you, with your lean, agile project management, value stream management, DevOps, a variety of different things through these products that we have: SWIFT Kanban, SWIFT Enterprise, and SWIFTease. Here a little bit about SWIFT Kanban itself. We of course have a wide range of use cases that SWIFT Kanban gets used for. A lot of it is, of course, software and IT, but we also have customers using it in business, in the business context, and to that extent, the session today relates to that of business agility. And people in HR or procurement or marketing or manufacturing, product design, etc., use of Kanban for a variety of different purposes to ultimately achieve their lean agile goals. One of the key things that we are sort of known for is our powerful flow analytics, and that's one of the topics for today. So hopefully some of you will relate to some of this functionality here. We provide, of course, a lot of capability in terms of portfolio Kanban and enterprise services planning for those of you who are familiar with the topic, and from building up hierarchies and visualizing them in portfolio lanes and portfolio columns to doing risk analysis, risk profiling, and demand shaping of your work in order to select the right set of things at the right time Those are some of the key capabilities that we enable you to do. And then, of course, a lot of predictive analytics capability that helps you and your teams become much better at setting expectations with the customers and becoming far more predictable in overall performance. We integrate with a whole range of tools. We have a lot of integration technology capability internally, and we also depend on some partners for this. And we typically integrate with most of the ALM tools, software engineering tools, as well as a variety of other collaboration and work management tools to really help you deliver a solution that you need for your overall lean agile initiatives. And then finally, just a quick look at some of our customers to give you an idea of what kind of companies use us. And we have customers with just a few people in their teams, 10 to 20 people, maybe even as small as that, using our product, to tens of thousands of users using our product. So we have sort of the capability to support all kinds of teams in terms of their use of our capabilities. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Sudhi. But before we do that, we have a quick couple of questions to ask you so that we get an idea of our audience. So firstly, like, if for those of you who are on the call and can respond to this survey, I'd like to know how long have you been working with Kanban, just to give us an idea of what our audience profile today is. Some of you, I'm sure, have been doing this for years. Some of you might be just getting started. Business agility, of course, is the newer topic, and but that doesn't mean that your Kanban journey didn't begin earlier itself. So we'll give a few more seconds and see what the profile looks like. All right, let's see the results. All right, great. So like I said, I think a lot of you have been at it for a long time, more than 3 years, more than nearly half the people. Okay, so also good to see that there are about a quarter of the audience that have not yet started or very early in their journey. So hopefully for all of you, this would be of great interest. People who are there for a long time, hopefully you will contribute to this session as well in terms of the Q&A. Let's take a look at what is the sort of function in which you've used Kanban. Again, this helps us to understand how widespread is lean and Kanban in the overall enterprise or in implementation of Agile. In the last, I would say several years, but I think in the last at least 3 to 4 years, there has been a tremendous emphasis on applying Agile outside of software and IT into business. And of course, we see that sporadically in our own experience, but would love to see what you are seeing in your sphere of influence. Okay, let's take a look at the results. All right, so really, again, obviously IT and software have a lot of contribution, but product management is actually good, is a very good sort of a significant segment for us as well. A lot of people who sign up for our products or users are product managers, so that's expected. Good set of people who are looking for business as well as personal Kanban applications. Great, thank you so much for responding to the survey. So with that, Sudhi, welcome to the session today. I'm going to stop sharing and let's get started with the first question based on the topic that we are looking at, as to what sort of why or how is flow related to agility. We have heard the phrase Kanban, sort of the alternative path to agility, enterprise agility, from the Kanban community. And I'm curious to see how you see it and how we are seeing our customers think about it.
So are you able to see my screen?
I'm seeing the presenter view, not the audience view. So I'm seeing the next slide on the side panel.
You're seeing the presenter view. Let me go back here. Our good friend decides to, let me change it to show screen. And do you see it correctly now?
Yes.
Awesome. So, the the language and the literature in the community has moved from agile methods, lean thinking, etc., into the need for the business itself to be agile, right? And that's how this whole business agility picked up traction, and that has happened for quite some time. It's been over a decade that people realize that hey, we need to move away from just an agile method to actually the outcome, which is the ability of the business to be able to rapidly change to its environment and what's happening around it. And clearly organizations which struggle with this fail no matter what is the scale and size, right? That's why disruptors are able to really spring a surprise on the established players, simply because they're more able and more agile in being able to respond to what's happening in the ecosystem around them. So now, what are the characteristics that facilitate business agility? And I've tried to break it up into two broad buckets. First is at the management and at the strategic level, and clearly, typically organizations and managements have viewed plans as being fairly stable and static. And clearly those days are gone, right? Plans will change, your commitments, you will have to adapt to what you thought you need to do. And when that change happens, it's not a failure, right? It's not it's something that you learn from acknowledging that, hey, what you planned was just a starting point. It by no means is supposed to be stable for an extended period of time. And from a management perspective, how do you recognize that, hey, our plans are not working? Based on what the data is, based on what the data you're presented with. To make this happen at an execution level, clearly we need an execution model that can rapidly change without being stuck to what it is doing already in progress, right? So you can't just say that, hey, I'm just going to drop everything midway and I'm going to jump to something else, right? So you need a model that can rapidly change from what it's doing to do and change gears and then jump to something else, bringing what it was doing to a logical end. Build systems that clearly generate, track user data acceptability, and design systems that generate data. Often, what we have experienced is that systems are not designed to collect data, and when that does not happen, and you try and put that after thought, it becomes very difficult to put all the instrumentation to be able to really understand what's happening at the usage level. So if you look at these two buckets, one is at what as in the leadership and the management needs to do, and then what at an execution level one needs to do. So let's stick to the execution level for the moment. Now here again, there are two aspects. One is the work itself, right? So if people are clearly doing a huge big chunk of work, like a 10, 15, 20% months of work, it's just hard to be able to just drop it midway and say, okay, I'm just going to shift out to something else from next week, right? The mind just would resist that. Even the organization would resist that, saying that, hey, we have already invested so much, we have still nothing has seen light at the end of the tunnel. Why don't we complete this and then shift to something else? So clearly that's going to delay your transition and your ability to be able to respond to the change in the ecosystem. So you need to be able to work in a manner so that you can quickly bring things to a logical point, so that you can then restart later once this need has been addressed. And therefore,
when you say big chunk of work, typically we're thinking agile, sort of legacy waterfall project type of work.
Right. Even now, I often see requirements which are not, for the lack of a better term, let's say broken right, and therefore you're stuck with just doing one layer of the work, just doing the client end, server side is going to happen sometime else, and so that kind of work you just can't bring it to a logical end, right? So it's just going to end halfway and get stuck there. So it therefore becomes important to be able to firstly work in smaller chunks of work, and we'll talk about that a minute later, but also recognize that, hey, the shorter the time cadence in which we are planning and executing, the faster we'll be able to respond to complete what we have planned during that time bucket, and then move to something else which has now come up on the business horizon. So the organization's ability to respond improves as you shorten the times, planning time, the execution time cycle that you're using for the, for all your planning activities. And then the people dimension, right? People need to understand that this is the new norm. Often there's an association that, hey, this is bad planning, or people did not do their homework right, management did not do their homework right, or product team did not do their homework right. That's not right. The fact is that organizations will face this. The nature of the business is volatile enough that you will anticipate change, and you have to be able to respond to that. Okay. Now, so therefore it becomes important to be able to communicate to the people who are going to execute what your new track is, what you're going to do next now, discarding what they were working on, or what they were mentally geared to work on. You have to be able to explain the reason and the rationale for it. You just can't dump onto them and say, okay, guys, from next Monday we are going to do this. All right. If you do that, you're going to have a bunch of people who have just not bought into why you're making that abrupt change, and what's the reason for that change itself. So so if you need business agility, therefore your unit of work should be independent, so that you can take it to a logical end, take it, ship it out, and be done with, and you can carry on with it with the rest of the planned capability when you revert back to it, if at all the need still is legitimate. Your unit of work has to be small. Obviously, if it is big, it cannot be delivered in small time buckets. It must deliver value, so that what you have worked on and what you have delivered is of value to somebody. Otherwise, it's going to sit in the lab and just go stale. And we know that stale code is, for all practical purposes, is dead code. After some point of time, you are not going to use it. Nobody is going to remember what was done. Again, if you are going to ship it, you need to be able to test it. And like we said, we need to design systems that will generate data, right? So that you can track that whatever, even if you stop this midway, whatever piece I've done so far, even if it is a fraction of the MVP that I had thought about, at least that much is delivered. Somebody is using it, and I'm able to track data whether it is delivering some value that I thought it should. So if we reconcile to this, if we understand that this is the norm of the new world, which is small, independent, value accretive, measurable, testable units of work, then as soon as this work comes, the team should take it one at a time and finish it as soon as possible, right? Because remember, our definition was rapidly being able to respond to change, not say, okay, good, now we have acknowledged it, it will take us 3 months to now plan it, design it, another 2 months to then work on it. So that's not rapid enough. So we need to be able to go ahead and respond to it in a manner that can actually meet the need at that point of the time. And here's, one of the greatest guys around, who said that people should sit on their hands and not silently become a bottleneck. Often what happens is we land up doing other things, and when we do other things, we create an ecosystem of work. We create a ripple impact of work all around us, because everything has to be, there's a supply chain. I'm doing something, somebody has to feed me, I have to feed it to somebody else. So you land up, if you work on something which is not really the need at this point of time, you land up creating a worse impact than what otherwise you would have been. So he made the statement that people should sit on their hands and not silently become a bottleneck. When work becomes, they should do it as fast as they can, and then again get back sitting on their hands. So you're essentially at that stage. So this is kind of a little bit of an extreme expression, but I think the spirit of the most sentiment is that if I am getting small independent units of work, which is testable, measurable, and value accretive, we should be able to take one at a time and rapidly finish it, deliver it, and be done with, and then get to the next one. And that's where flow comes in. Because what is flow? Flow is continuous movement of work like a water stream, where value accretion happens as you move from the left to the right of the stream through impediments, right? Though removing impediments will help increase your velocity and increase the pace, but every system will have impediments. It's guaranteed to be there. And so one has to move around impediments and at a pace so that there is no unevenness, right? There is no situation where one side you have no work, no water, another side there's a huge amount of water, there's a collection of work. So you want to move at a sustainable pace that will keep the water flowing, that will keep work flowing from left to right. That is what will help you take the business agility objective forward, because now you're able to respond to change as soon, because you're working in small units of work. Even if you need to drop something, you can put it to a logical end, change gears, move on to what now the system needs to respond to, and take it and expedite it and move forward. So
Right.
that is why flow becomes critical.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, that statement by Goldratt reminds me of the expression that I heard early on in our Kanban journey when somebody said, so the normal expression is, don't just stand there, do something, right? And Kanban's sort of response was, don't just do something, stand there, sort of stand back, observe, and then plan for the next, and not be busy doing something all the time. Okay, great. So let's go on to the next question around this. So what are the elements of flow? So how do you sort of think about flow, and what are the elements?
So most people understand at least in our community by now, are well familiar with with lean thinking and how we have adapted to it, right? So flow is how work progresses through a system. It needs to flow smoothly, and we want to strive for consistent flow that generates reliable delivery and value for everybody in the ecosystem. And we all are familiar with the core principles, right? There's nothing really outstandingly new here that I think anybody who's part of the talk today would be unfamiliar with. What I want to focus on is something else. So this is granted, right? I mean, I'm just assuming that we all know this and we all understand this. What I think we talk a lot about and do pretty little about is the other part, which is that in knowledge services, beyond, in contrast to the Toyota production system, which was, where we were essentially dealing in the manufacturing industry, where machines were automating operations. In knowledge services, it's all about people delivering that unit of work, right? It's not the machine delivering. The machine is just a tool. It is the people delivering a unit of work. I'm not saying that people were not important in the Toyota production system, but I'm saying the only instrument to be able to generate value in knowledge services are people. And therefore, it is important to be understand and recognize that apart from all our focus on how work can make flow, we need to be able to understand and recognize how can we make people experience flow. Because if one is there and the other is not there, the overall outcome is still going to be abysmal. So I want to spend a little more time on the second bucket, though we'll come back and talk about the flow of work itself. Now, as I said, most people are aware of what we need to do on the flow of work. They understand the principles. Implementation is still suspect. We see umpteen number of examples where people put WIP limits but do nothing about it. It's just there for information only. So we are familiar with that, but people know what is to be done. Now it's a question of being conscious and doing something about it with leadership support, with some level of management support and team buy-in. But on the other side, I think there is a low awareness, and the less said, the better about implementation itself. So let's talk about that for a minute. Now, this is again some people in the Kanban community are familiar with, right? Which is that how do we make people really flow in their work? And it's a very tricky balance of the skill level of the person and the complexity and the challenge level that you're giving that person for the unit of work that you're giving to that person. So if you are giving something which the person is very skilled and adapt to and has been done there repeatedly n number of years, it fundamentally is boring to that person. It fundamentally, the guy generates a level of disinterest, saying, who cares? Okay, I'll just do it, right? On the other hand, if you essentially give something where it is very complex for their skill level, they clearly are not going to be worried. They're clearly going to be anxious because they're going to wonder hey, if I'm not able to deliver, would I be rated well? What would be my impact on my career? So you get into all these issues when the balance is not right between the complexity of work and the skill level of the person. I think many of us are familiar with it, but we do a lip service to it. And the reason we do lip service to it is because all of us are fundamentally focused on customer value generation. People and their impact, it becomes good to talk about, it's a good intellectual discussion to happen, but on an execution scale, it doesn't go beyond a lip service. I've seen very few teams being able to actually consciously be able to move in this direction. In all honesty, it happens even within us in Digita. So it is something that we really need to be conscious about to understand how can we make people flow. There is another work that actually I want to highlight, and there are quite a few other people who have talked about these areas. This is by a gentleman called Her's theory in the late 60s, if I recall, from Baylor University, where they talk about the contribution cycle of a person. And what they talk about is that essentially a person's, when they start, their interest level is high. They're learning what's happening in that project. They're learning how to do that. They reach a zone where they're just, they've learned it well enough. They're humming along. They're delivering what they need to be, what needs to be done. But now if you keep them in that zone, which is the zone B, slowly they start getting bored, right? And at some stage, it feels like a daily prison. We do our own fit for purpose survey within Digitech engineering teams, and repeatedly we get this feedback saying we want a technology refresh. We want a technology refresh, and it's very hard for the product to keep doing technology refresh at a pace that we can keep up with, because there are investments and there are technical artifacts that have already been designed and have and that have been laid out in a certain manner. So if you look at whether we look at Mihail's work, or we look at Professor Baylor's work, Professor Her's work, all talking about similar things, that one needs to make a significant investment and think about how can we make people flow beyond just thinking about how to make work flow across the value stream. There is another great body of work which again summarizes everything put together. So all of we know a lot of it. This is nothing perhaps completely new, but what happens is our action is almost always reactive. Either when the guy decides to resign, we respond to the situation, or the customer is screaming for us at us because of something not getting done right by by the team, then we do a root cause analysis and then we'll respond to the situation. But rarely do we proactively think about what is happening to the individual who's working on the day-to-day uh, work unit, and then understand, okay, how can I improve his engagement level? How can I improve his contribution to the team? What do I need to be able to do to be able to make a greater, more positive outcome for the individual? So I want to pause with that at this stage, Mahesh, because I want to keep those two things very distinct, saying flow as we have generally interacted and talked about, we relate to flow of work. But I think it is equally important, if not more, to make sure that the actors who are going to work on that work are also experiencing flow.
Right. So one thought occurs to me that a lot of this might be, is it, and it's a question really, is this more at an individual level where they are feeling, they either are in a prison like you said, and they're personally getting bored, they're not feeling challenged enough, and all of and at the right time they get challenged, and you go through a day and you feel in the zone, you have a really productive day, and so on and so forth. Is it more individual, or is it also experienced by a team overall?
So clearly this specific is obviously at an individual level, but the individual, 6-7 people as an individual make the team hum together, right? So if your people are down, there's no way the team is going to be strongly reinforced, right? The team is not
Right.
going to be upbeat if majority of the people in the team are down. If you have a team where 5 of them are feeling upbeat and 1 of them is uh, down for whatever reason, clearly you have a disconnect. Now, the disconnect could be because of what's happening in his work life. The disconnect could be what is happening in their personal life, whatever be it. But there is a disconnect. And of course, then one needs to think about how to be able to turn that around, what can be done, how can you, recover from that situation. The point that I'm trying to make is that we are also obsessed with our metrics of throughput, velocity, outcome, customer satisfaction, that for the most part, our investment in people becomes an offsite meeting, or it becomes a retrospective that we try and somehow hurriedly finish it through, or some training program somewhere else. Okay,
Right.
and that's it. And even machines need preventive maintenance, even machines need downtime, even machines need software upgrades, right? And somehow we just don't recognize, we just assume that whosoever is on the team, they're there to be able to do what we need them to do.
Right. Right. Okay, great. Let's go to the sort of third question, which is I know part of your main talk, which is what prevents flow from happening? How does one address them? And I want to ask a separate question later on, and you address it a little bit here. That let's say the team is doing everything well as they should. How do then they know that flow is happening? How do they, in a way, measure to see that the flow is actually happening, or maybe even at the individual level? But let's first talk about what prevents flow from happening. How does one address those issues?
So I'll talk about a few impediments. By no means this is the exhaustive list of it, but I'll talk about some things that really stand out to me because of how frequently I see them. Now, at a team level, I think I see so often people still looking at task boards, right? There is very little understanding or even an intent to be able to really map it to a value stream, understand the stages through which work progresses. Again, perhaps people in the Kanban community are very well familiar with this, but a huge percentage of the Scrum and the Scrumban community is still looking at it as task force. So people are getting given a task, and people, I mean, we all know, I mean, you and I know that some of our customers have asked for a to-do board because they want to look at the to-do board and not at the value stream where the cards are the outcome. So we know that is the prevalent way of working, and clearly that becomes an impediment beyond a certain level of execution. Pull-based execution, I don't know if any, I mean, I have still not seen real pull-based execution. It's absolutely rare in my opinion. I have still not seen, and I would love to hear anybody who's actually experienced pull-based execution. And again, for multiple reasons. I think once again, we often tend to have somebody who's going to plan for others how they think that work would be most optimally serviced. So it all becomes a part of that thinking that I have to create as much as outcome as possible, as fast as possible. Nothing wrong, but we lose the long-term benefits trying to push for the short-term benefit. WIP limit implementations are, largely information only. And of course, again, we are aware of local optimization because teams work in silos. So if I'm the developer, I'm responsible for development, or let's say coding. I will give utmost focus to it. If somebody else is responsible for the for some of the NFRs, it's their headache to be able to look at how the security testing will happen. Now again, all the literature around DevOps, etc., is trying to shift leg, trying to correct these patterns, but these patterns exist. By no means can we say that the majority of the teams have reached a level where these patterns have changed today. Now, this is for us the most pet topic of mine. The first one, again, I think people know about it. It's a question of having the willpower to be able to say, yes, we will do it. So it's a question of knowledge being there, execute. Now it has to be up to the team with some level of leadership support that you execute it. This one is a problem right from the top. Right, this is how our traffic in Bangalore looks like. This is actually Bangalore picture, by the way.
I like the visuals. Yeah, I like the visuals.
So we know that utilization is a classic vanity metric because it completely takes the focus away from outcome. Right? It doesn't ask the question, what are we delivering in business? What are we delivering to the end customer? It focuses on, are our people busy? The assumption is that because my people are busy, my people are delivering outcome. Those two are completely two different things. People could be busy trying to prove each other wrong. Nothing gets generated out of the system. People are still busy. So, I'm sure all of us have seen this. I face this on a pretty, I think I would say, weekly basis, right? That when you're planning cycle, if let's say your capability is 100 person hours per month, and a certain epic will take 100 person hours, you estimate it. The immediate conclusion at a planning level is it will take 1 month, right? Nothing can be further away from reality. Firstly, the 100 person hours that you estimate itself is incorrect. But number two is that there are so many things that happen in the system. There are just so many things. So depending upon the volatility of the system, if you're having a very high demand volatility, if you have 1-2 weeks where there is no defect leak or no defect reported, and then 2 weeks, 1 week where you have 10 defects that get reported that need to be done within another next week, all your planning is going to go for a toss. Right? If you have a capability volatility, let's say you have a situation where people are being pulled across from another team because of something that is happening on that side, or let's say you have a situation where where your work environment is such that people are not able to dedicate the full time that they plan to for whatever reason. Okay, let's say you have a lot of people who are new to the industry, who are still learning their ways. You do not have a steady capability outcome in these scenarios. So to be able to plan with a high percentage of utilization when your demand volatility or capability volatility does not make sense. At that stage, you need to plan for a low level of utilization. Now, the problem is management teams think that low utilization means idle time. And therefore the question comes, oh, I'm paying salaries. How can I have people idle? Now, firstly, low utilization does not mean idle time. And that's why I use that word low planned utilization, right? So let's say in the IT industry, when people say that, hey, the large IT service companies in India work on, let's say, 80% utilization, that doesn't mean that the balance 20% of the people are sitting and doing nothing, or you're paying them salary for doing nothing. They're doing something, but they're not doing planned work, or their planned work is not an end customer related. They're planned to do something else, right? So the concept of doing nothing is very difficult to accept. And just because we have invested in a person doesn't mean that we have to make that person keep humming along. So if your DNA does not let you move away from utilization, the catch is to use a lower than commensurate utilization. So let's say if you have a fair amount of volatility, demand or capability volatility, plan for, let's say, 70% utilization, 65% utilization. What does that mean? That means that when you have volatility in demand, when you suddenly have something which is critical, you can get that, you can take that work and service that demand without disrupting the things that you're planned with that 65% utilization factor. So you're able to honor your commitments and deliver your planned work, yet being able to adjust to that volatility because you did not plan for 90% utilization. So if you do not have, I mean, clearly, if you do have capacity or capability, you can then deliver some demand work, which would then be a case of an exceeding expectation beyond than what you had planned. Every system has a ton of technical debt. You can clean up technical debt. You can do some of the intangibles that we in the Kanban community are well familiar with. You can also do stuff that you know are repeated points of failure or would add to the stability of what your delivery system is. So you can do a lot of things for that balance 35% or 30% that you have not committed or used for the planned work, but you're just not planning for that higher level of utilization so that you are not able to, so that you can commit, stick to your commitments, business can plan accordingly with those commitments being sure of. And that brings me to the next concept, which is what we call in the Kanban community as flow debt. Now, what does flow debt means? Flow debt essentially simply means that when you stop one work item midway, you pick up another work item ahead of it because it's need to be expedited or something has to be done to that next one, to the one that has just come on right now, you're essentially going to delay the cycle time of the first work item. So you're going to build on the flow debt or the cycle time, the flow debt of the first work item because you are interrupting it and taking up the second work item. Now, why do you care? Why is this important? Why is this idea important? Because every time you disrupt a planned work to be able to respond to an unplanned work, you're essentially causing a potential of dissatisfaction of service for the person who was expecting that planned work. Whether it is your own product management team, whether it is your business, whether it is your end user, but you essentially are creating dissatisfaction because you're not able to deliver planned work because of that interrupt that you happen. And so it brings to the same point again that if you have a high demand volatility coupled with a high level of utilization that your management is pushing you to, you will land up with higher and higher flow debt, which in other words, I should have perhaps added another bubble out there, which means lower and lower customer satisfaction because planned work will not happen. So it's important to be able to understand that utilization is a factor of your demand utility. You can't just blindly push for, even in classic Toyota production systems, they would never push for zero inventory. They would always say that hey, every machine stage needs to have some inventory depending upon what is the volatility level that you're expecting in the demand. So this is not something unique to just our knowledge services space. Even in traditional lean thinking Toyota production system, the concept of having some inventory out there was always present. Just in time did not mean that everything has to be just completely zero inventory. The other question, the other impediment that I see again from the management level. Now, I mean, obviously, I'm referring to management level basically with the hope that people will be able to have an engaging conversation with their management teams to be able to explain some of these concepts. But typically, you're right, yeah, could be, but typically the first question that leadership would ask is, when can I get it, right? And the question easily needs to be flipped around to say, when do you need it? Because when the minute you flip the question around to when do you need it, you're obviously making the person think that, okay, what is really the need? I've been often asked the question, is ASAP an acceptable answer? And the answer is no. I mean, if somebody tells you ASAP, you can say, okay, I will assume 6 months and I'll give you what can be done in 6 months. Then you will really hear that no, 6 months is too late. It should be 3 months. So if you ask the question that when do you need it, then you can turn around the question to say, okay, if you need it in 3 months, this is what I can get done in 3 months, right? So therefore, that's the flip side of the question, to be able to take them around from the concept of a fixed scope that has to be delivered in a certain cost and time to saying, okay, let's deliver how much we can within the time and the cost that we need, continuously doing the validation cycle of whether we are meeting the fit for purpose objective. And I'll kind of add quickly to retrospectives. Everybody knows what happens in retrospectives. But my experience of retrospective is there's just too much focus on things which are outside the system's circle of influence. It's a waste of time. It doesn't help. Saying that, hey, our people are not skilled enough doesn't help you at this point of time. Okay, you can escalate it, you can see with the management how to resolve a situation, but at this point of time with your team, there's nothing you can do about it. You got a team, you got to work with that team. So what you need to figure out is how to be able to identify actionable impediments so that you can remove one stone at a time from the river flow within your circle of influence. If there's a huge boulder on the river that is beyond this 5 people's team to be able to remove it, don't worry about it. Try and figure how you can work around it. Take that as a constraint. Right. So focus on the circle of influence. That's what I wanted to just keep the thought on as far as this point was concerned. So all those things where I talked about was related to impediments related to flow of work. I want to add one thing about about what can be done for people experiencing flow. What are the impediments? What's a key impediment that I see around that? The problem that I see is, and I see this even as an engineering head, is that we are just so much on a day-to-day work basis that we just don't get a breathing space. So how do you incentivize a person who's responsible for delivering value to customer to make them think about doing some of these things with the people? It just doesn't happen, right? Because your focus is not there. This is not the key thing that you are being tracked for or you are being measured for. This is just taken for granted that, hey, it's going to happen automatically. It doesn't. So one of the things that I would recommend, and we at Digita have made some initial steps in this direction, is to create what are called as helical structures. The concept existed, but I think it's becoming more and more dominant now, which is essentially to diverge the capability track versus the value creation track. So a person can be completely moving from one team to another, from a third team to fourth team, coming back to the first team, depending upon what's the need of the particular sprint scope or a release scope, whatever you call it. But they can completely move very fast across teams. But there is a capability manager who's static and stable, who's associated with the person for the long haul, with whom you can have this conversation, right? So now
Right.
you have clearly
Right.
identified somebody separate to have this conversation with, who can then figure out how to be able to make an impact change for that person. They might need to go to that delivery track and to the value creation manager, figure out how they can help, but that conversation can now be enabled, and you can facilitate that. So you can Google about it. It's been there around in many forms and shape, but I think it is becoming
Mm-hmm.
more and more prominent and more relevant for what we need to do. Let me end
All right.
here. I'm ready to take some questions. Of course, I know that there are some questions, that the people have already asked, and we can take those up.
Yeah, let's take a couple of interesting questions that we have. I know that we're kind of short on time, and I think you answered this question earlier. This is from Klaus Schneck, and his question was, and I'm going to get Klaus on the line here as well. But his question was, how to best absorb inevitable variability by customers and service industries for innovation and development to protect flow efficiency. So you talked about that a little bit, but how do you prepare for the variability that we all experience? And
I mean, I think the answer is calibrate the utilization at which you are trying to do. So you cannot go to your management and say, I will work at 70% utilization, right? That cannot be the way to respond to your management, because obviously
yeah,
the question is going to be, what are they going to do for the balance 30%? So you don't say that. What you're going to position it is saying, hey, we will do the planned work for 70% of the time. We will do a lot of ABCDE work for the balance 30%. And guess what? If we have some expedited work or some critical work that does come up in the planned work, we will then have this window to be able to take out stuff from that 30% bucket and move this in. So my balance 70% can go on as I plan and as as we have tracked and committed to, but we'll have the ability to be able to respond to that volatile situation and demand um, by actually creating a window of opportunity there. Mahesh, are you there?
sorry about that. Speaking on the mute button here. There's a question from Jim Brown, and his question was, what is the difference between flow debt and technical debt? And I think you sort of addressed it already. So let me go ahead and take up some questions that came up live just now. And this is from, I may pronounce your name incorrectly, Reed. The question is, although value streams are common knowledge, it is not common practice. How do you convince an organization in the middle of an M&A activity to define and organize around value streams? I know that people have a lot of challenge, even understanding what value stream is about, and then even to identify and visualize them. Clearly, reorganizing around that can be a huge challenge. So, what are your thoughts, Sudhi?
So, firstly, if you are in an M&A situation, I think there are far more critical concerns that people would perhaps have around whether their job is at safe and how it's going to impact everything else. I would obviously say that that would be the first thing to be able to focus on. I think the discussion around implementation of value streams has to be to kind of align to customer value, right? So if you, for example, if you are structured, just giving an example, if you're structured to say this is a server team, this is a front end team, this is a database team, And we often were structured like that earlier. So if you're structured like that, or architecturally you are structured like that, then you can very clearly say, try to take the discussion around saying, hey, how can we restructure ourselves around the product lines and deliver along the product lines that we so that we take people from each of these, and that becomes one organization to be able to deliver product A, that becomes another team to deliver product B, that becomes another team to deliver product C. So I think that kind of discussion would help. Clearly, people would not, if people have a level of comfort and people have a level of stability around what they're going to, what they do today, they will not want to make that change. Two ways to solve that problem: do it in either a greenfield development initiative where you have where you will not face that challenge and you can establish success and make that as a case study. Other, if you do not have that opportunity, again, two parts: make them attend conferences and webinars like this so that they understand what we're talking about, or number one. Or number two, just take one small candidate project or candidate product line from the current environment and just convince people to do one pilot for 6 to 9 months. Don't take a very short time, because you know that in the short time you will hit the J curve. So you will hit instability before you will achieve a higher level of stability. So don't take too short a time bucket for the pilot. Convince them to give you 6 to 9 months and then see how that outcome happens. Those would be my thoughts.
Yeah, no, great thought. And I think that if the leadership team at the company hasn't yet heard about value stream management, there is a lot of work that you have to do upfront in order for them to even think about it. So I think doing it at a later stage with greenfield type of efforts might be the best way to do it. We are kind of nearly out of time, but let's take one last question, which was essentially, in a way, the question that I was asking earlier. So how do you experience flow? And so what are the key metrics? This is a question from Francisco Cordero. What are the key metrics needed to measure flow to connect to business results?
So we do some basic things. It's not too complex. One is obviously, you look at, you essentially want to see the cycle time at each of the stages, the throughput at each of the individual stages. If they're roughly equal, you know that that there is a fairly uniform pace at which things are happening. In Swift Kanban, there's a great capability called playback. So you actually run the playback and you can see where work is becoming a bottleneck. That tells you that there is no flow, there's a constraint, there's a bottleneck that is developing here. So at a visual level, that is good enough. The important thing is not to make this as a religion. You don't need to completely get obsessed with it. As long as you look at it on a once a sprint level and say, okay, this is what happened, why did this happen, let's take that input into the retrospective and see what can be done about it. You will have enough continuous improvement to be able to keep your journey alive.
Great. Folks, we are unfortunately out of time because both Sudhi and I have to run to another meeting. But there were a couple of questions that we didn't address. We will certainly follow up with you to make sure that we respond to them. There was a question about whom can you connect in marketing to talk about value stream management. You can reach out to me. My email is on the right-hand side there. And we plan to continue these conversations, so we certainly want to make sure that we cover topics that were suggested by some of the questions that came in as well. And so we hope to continuously sort of engage with all of you as well as others, and be able to answer questions around business agility and flow in our upcoming session. So stay tuned, and we would love to see you again and talk to you again through these conversations. So with that, let me
around tips from one gentleman. I think I'm forgetting the name, but we can they can reach out to us and we can perhaps have a separate one-on-one.
Yeah, that is a large topic. Correct. So that is a large topic. So I didn't want to take it up right now, but we will certainly talk to you about how do you share some tips about how do you organize end-to-end value stream flows.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Great. Thanks everybody for joining in today, and we look forward to seeing you next. Suri, thanks a lot, and let's do it again sometime soon.
Thanks. Take care. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.